acidity that lactic acid has. In fact, that's how you do alkalize somebody who's very acidic. That's why apple cider vinegar is such a great tonic for people. It's an acid, it's acetic acid, it's a mild acid, but it has a very, very, in fact, it's one of the things I recommend to people that have acid reflux, is make this New England drink called switchel. You ever hear of switchel? It's a teaspoon to a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar in a glass of water with a teaspoon to a tablespoon of honey or honey or maple syrup. Before meals, during meals. You can't believe the relief a lot of people get. You know why? Because you have the pyloric valve at the bottom of the stomach that's based on acidity. When the acid levels get adequate enough, the door opens and it flushes to the next gut. Now this is interesting. I want to talk about the gut a little bit. Low pH, very acid, good. What happens when you take a Rolaids or a Pepsid or a purple pill? You neutralize the hydrochloric acid. What happens when you eat a lot of food? You fill your stomach up with a lot of food. It absorbs all the hydrochloric acid. Message to the brain, full stomach, need more acid. Right? Good thing. Brain now kicks in. The endocrine system turns on the valve, says, here comes the hydrochloric acid because you have a lot of food in there. Same thing happens if you neutralize the hydrochloric acid with what? H2 inhibitors or buffers like Rolaids and Tums. So the body says, just ate a full meal, do it again. Do it again. Do it again. Until you finally start exhausting the body's ability to produce hydrochloric acid. Now, the proteins that are supposed to be dismembered with hydrochloric acid go downstream into the small intestine. What's the pH of the small intestine? It goes from the stomach, below 2, very acidic, to above 7 to 8, alkaline. Now, and why is it alkaline? Because one of the things that the pancreas produces, which is dumping enzymes into the small intestine, is bicarbonate. You ever hear of sodium bicarbonate, called baking soda? Your pancreas makes bicarbonate to create a higher pH. Lots of enzymes now are going in there until it finally, and the microvilli now are starting to make their own enzymes. And all these proteins that were supposedly preliminarily digested in the stomach are now secondarily digested in the small intestine. And the peptides are now broken down into the building blocks of protein called amino acids. And now we can get the amino acids into the bloodstream and feed the cell. Remember, you're feeding the cell. So if that's the way it works and you don't have these peptides broken down, they just rot in the small intestine. And now you got putrefaction. And now you've got indoles and scadoles and mercaptans and ammonia and these compounds which are pretty nasty. And they end up in the bloodstream. And you end up with side effects from liver problems, kidney problems, respiratory problems, allergies, all kinds, a host of things that come as a consequence of the stomach not being dealt with from the first instance. I'm going to go through these here. I already went through that. All this points out is something that's interesting. This is measuring amino acids in the various feeds. Amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. Those are the essential. There's 8 essential amino acids. There's a total of 22 amino acids. The non-essentials are just as important as the essentials. But you can't make the non-essentials unless you eat the essentials first. That's why they're called essential. Like essential fatty acids, they have to be in your diet. Essential amino acids must be in your diet to make the non-essential amino acids. These are the essentials. What does this point out? This points out that bacteria, they measured the bacteria for the amino acid content of it in the rumen of the animal. And they found out that the bacteria, the quality of the protein, that's what they're measuring here. It's the quality of the protein of the microbes that live inside the animal. That could be you too. Is as good as any high quality feed. The only thing that beats the bacteria overall is blood meal, feather meal, meat and bone meal, which are animal proteins, which you can't feed to animals anyway. So I just wanted to point that out to show you how bacteria are so quality. I'm going to move on here. This just shows you that as the pH of the rumen drops, you can see that dark line is vinegar. That's acetic acid. As you start feeding more grain to an animal, the production of acetic acid falls off, and the increase of the lactic acid, which is that dotted line, goes up. pH starts at 7, goes all the way down to 5. So as you increase the acidity of that rumen, lactic acid starts to go up. That's the stuff that ends up in the animal's bloodstream, smashes the liver to smithereens, the kidneys, blows the feed off the cattle. Now, here we go, back to the future. 1952, #1 herd in the world at that time. I bring this up only to make a point. Again, what have we learned in 50-some years? #1 cow in the world. Carnation Dairies in Washington State, they had all breeds of cattle. They had 135 cows with milk production. Over 1,000 pounds of butter fat, and the average in 1952 was 200 pounds. This cow produced 42,000 pounds of milk in one lactation, 1,500 pounds of butter fat. That's a record by today's numbers. Now, that's fine. So what? Genetics. That cow, by the way, weighed 2,000 pounds. A low rider, wide. Lots of opportunity, because if you look at what they fed that cow, you can't see it maybe from where you're sitting. #1 intake, pasture. To the top herd in the world, pasture. Then some beet pulp, sliced beets, alfalfa hay, kelp, molasses. That cow got 20 pounds of grain. That's nothing for a 42,000 pound cow. Today, we like seeing grass-fed cows that are producing 10 to 13,000 pounds of grain, getting a few of milk, a few pounds of grain a day. 20 pounds of grain on a 42,000 pound cow, but when you look at the grain, what's the #1 ingredient in the grain? Wheat bran. #2 ingredient, ground oats. #3 ingredient is corn. And they had all this diverse other stuff, coconut meal, flaxseed meal, rolled barley. Very diverse grain mix, not corn and soy like we use today. I'm bringing this up to show that we already knew this stuff. This is 1952. They started this herd in 1910. This is the guy who invented acetylene for Union Carbide. Came up from North Carolina to Buffalo, New York to work for Union Carbide there. Bought a family cow, 1922. Randley Farms was founded. It became a research facility like Malabar Farm was. He worked with Ohio State University's guy called Professor Oscar Erf. And what did they do? They had nothing but Jersey cows on grass there, and they had their own lab rats on their own raw milk. I don't even have the raw milk studies that they did, but they did raw milk studies on cows on different rations, mostly on grass, and then they found out that these animals that were on pasture fed the milk to the rats, ripped the teeth out of the sacrificed rats, cut them longitudinally, examined them under microscopy, and found out what the Denton did after they exposed these animals to vitamin D lamps in the middle of the winter time, because they discovered vitamin D in the 1920s. And they said, we don't have any vitamin D hardly in the wintertime, so let's give them vitamin D ultraviolet radiation in the milking parlor in the wintertime. They did all kinds of research. They had 300 lab rats on that farm to test the raw milk because they knew milk was a medicine back at that time. They were selling raw milk to the sanitariums in New York, the tuberculosis sanitariums, to heal the patients. I mean, I know I'm preaching to the choir here relative to raw milk, but there's a lot of research on the medicinal properties of raw milk, but the real question is why? And the why is the nutrition that was in the soil and then ultimately in the forages and then alchemically converted into these medicinal substances by these ruminant animals. So what we did here is we basically set up a mineral ledger. You can get it in my catalog if you look at this. These are the targets I look for minerals in forages. Look for the minerals in the forages because they're not just minerals. Plants take minerals, we're going to talk about this in depth, and turn them into other things. Humans take minerals and turn them into other things.